Good afternoon, everyone. I'm happy to host another webinar with University of Illinois Extension and Rural Partners today. We have on Kenan Fikri from the Economic Innovation Group here to talk to us today about the impact and effects of opportunity zones and facilitate a little bit of a conversation around what this means for Illinois and the situation in Illinois regarding our use of opportunity zones. And before we pass it over to Kenan, would want to also let Laura Hepkessel give some remarks today as well. And then Laura, you will be able to pass it on to Kenan Fikri, Research Director from the Economic Innovation Group. Again, so happy to have you on here to greet us today, and happy to have Kenan as well. And after Kenan's presentation today, we're also very happy to have on Allison Grady from the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, who's just going to briefly give us some remarks and some information about the Illinois resources for opportunity zones. So we're happy to have Kenan and Allison on, and thank you again, Laura, for your remarks.
Thanks, Nancy. I'm Laura Hepkessel. I'm the past chair of the Rural Partners Board. If you're not familiar with Rural Partners, we are the state's Rural Development Council. We are a volunteer working board. We work off of membership dues, and we try to offer events for our members throughout the year. One of the things that we do is partner with U of I Extension, and we're so thankful for that partnership to offer these webinar series with them, in addition to the other webinars that they offer. If you want more information, I will put our website in the chat box so that you can check us out. But we'd love for you to get in touch with us, to consider being a member, and join us as we try to connect people and resources across rural Illinois. So again, thanks to U of I Extension for partnering with us on this, and thanks to Kenan for today's presentation. I'm going to pass it on to him. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Laura. Thanks, Nancy, and thanks everyone for joining today. It's my pleasure to call in from Washington, D.C., where EIG is based, to talk to you a little about what opportunity zones, or what's happening with opportunity zones nationally, kind of where we are in the life of this policy, and offer some lessons and some stories of impact and really what's happening on the ground in Illinois, or in communities, rural communities in neighboring states, elsewhere, and just endeavor to be a helpful resource for you on opportunity zones. For those of you who don't know, so EIG was instrumental in hatching the idea behind this, seeing the need for a new tool in the federal economic development and community development toolkit to encourage private sector investment into struggling and low-income communities at scale. And we've been deeply involved in just watching the emerging marketplace take shape, trying to drive opportunity zones investors in the ecosystem towards impact, and educating people on what they can do with this incentive. So I will see if I can advance slides. Yes. Today I'll walk you through 4 different sections of this presentation. First, just a background on what opportunity zones are and how they work, just to get everyone level set and up to speed. Then second portion will be look at the best available data we have on the national investment landscape, with some local data there too. 3, research director, research nerd guy. So I'm going to tell you a bit of the state of the research on what the impact out there in the field looks like around opportunity zones at this point in time, what we can say, what we can't say, and what many of the open questions are. And then the last section, if you'll stick with us for that long, is a bunch of anecdotes and demonstration cases of OZs in action, kind of from the field, and hopefully inspiration for your own work. So let's start at the top. What are these things and how do they work? So these were opportunity zones. They're a provision of the federal tax code that they were passed as part of the 2017 tax reform package. However, they have a long kind of bipartisan heritage that preceded that. and they are designed to encourage private sector investment in low-income communities. That's the role that they are designed to play in the incentive ecosystem that exists. And yeah, that's what they do. How they do it is OZs offer capital gains tax benefits. So all the benefits really apply to capital gains. Either people have capital gains that then they invest in opportunity zones, and then from there, the incentives work based on the capital gains that folks have or don't have on the investments that they then make in an opportunity zone. They have to make qualifying investments, so not just anything goes. It has to meet certain characteristics laid out in statute and regulation. That's patiently held for at least 10 years. And then in designated and qualifying low-income communities that were designated by governors, by the governor of Illinois, with input often from local stakeholders too. So some things that I always always like to remind people about is that, at the end of the day, the OZ incentives, they are claimed by private taxpayers. This is administered via the tax code, almost like the home mortgage interest deduction or something along those lines. They are not tax credits, not like a new markets, not like a LIHTC or some of the other tools that you may be familiar with from the federal government in your work. That means that there's also no cap on their utilization. We're not talking about a fixed sum that's already been allocated here. It's a tax expenditure. People claim them at the end of the tax year. And they're up there open free for investors, really a broad base of folks from families, from business owners, from corporate entities, really anyone who has a capital gain to potentially utilize. The qualifying investments, they have to be by nature new and additive to a community. So property can't just trade hands and be eligible for OZ incentives, but there are real stipulations in here that make sure it is new or really big substantial improvement to existing property in a opportunity zone in order to be eligible for the investments. We'll come back to that theme later too. And the public and nonprofit sectors, they have no defined role in statute here, which is a little surprising. Sometimes it's unfamiliar for folks steeped in new markets and some of these other more intermediated federal economic development incentives. But there are ample opportunities to be market shapers, market makers, and kind of influence and draft the OZ investor ecosystem towards impact or towards your own local goals. I know most of the attendees here are representing rural areas from the state, but in this space, since you have such a strong local example of this in the Chicago area, I wanted to mention the Chicagoland OZ Consortium, which is housed by a CDFI in the Chicago area that brings together all the major CDFIs in the region, major philanthropies, the city, the county, major institutional investors like the banks, and DCEO from the state together to really be a kind of convening place and information broker for what's happening in opportunity zones in the state, gather information and educate people, and really just serve as a broker and again a market maker and market shaper to make sure that entities are talking to each other locally and that there's a pipeline of impactful projects ready and kind of being fed into the ecosystem that can take advantage of this incentive. So they're I think a great example on a metropolitan scale of what can be done. We'll get to some local examples at smaller scales and from rural areas later as well. Okay, that was the top. Happy to answer more detailed questions when we have time at the end about what these actually are. So let's take a look at kind of where are we in opportunity zones. They were passed in 2017. Here we sit in 2023. What the heck's gone on in between? Now, unfortunately, federal government, there are lots of things that could do better, one of which is supplying timely data, especially around opportunity zones. The best available information we have is from the year 2020. And at that time, really just 3 years into OZ's young life, we already saw that about 3,800 communities nationwide had registered at least one opportunity zone investment based on, this is based on some data that, limited data that the U.S. Department of Treasury released to the public a few months ago. So that's almost half of opportunity zones had seen some activity through the incentive by 2023, by the end of 2020. That represented only really 1 full year of actual mature OZ marketplace because it took 2 years to write the regulations. Just for comparison on the scale here, it took the new markets tax credit about 18 years to reach an equivalent number of communities. In part, that's because the new markets tax credit is capped each year, can only has so much money to give to only so many places. OZs, again, is uncapped, so you can get a sense of how it can, come to ground in far more communities far more quickly than something like NMTC, as valuable as that is for other things. The total amount of direct OZ equity investment that was coming through this new incentive was at least $48 billion by the end of 2020. That's likely at least doubled since. So we think that about $100 billion has been raised in direct OZ equity capital, with a lot of leverage behind that of additional lending. Especially if we're talking about real estate projects. Of course, equity is only one portion of a much larger portfolio that's financing things in the ground there. So we're talking about really big scale, actually. And this has been spread across 21,000 individual investors and 4,000 corporate investors, having filed those tax returns claiming OZ incentives by the end of 2020. As I mentioned, we think that the size of the market has at least doubled since that end of 2020 date that we saw on the last slide. Here I'm showing you data from Novogradac and Company that has the best private sector information out there on what's happening in the OZ marketplace. They're filling some of the gap by issuing a survey every quarter to known opportunity funds. Their top line number is going to be much lower. You see by June 2023, they're only registering $36 billion. So I don't want you to focus on those numbers, but more on the trajectory of what we think likely fundraising has been like nationally. And you can see it was quite significant in the early years of the pandemic. And both other observers think that the true size of the market is 3 or 4 times what they are tracking. So where's that going? So opportunity zones, they had to be designated. Governors had to nominate at least a quarter or up to 1/4 of their low income census tracts as opportunity zones. But from there, investors were free to find opportunities in zones of any type, as long as they were designated and qualified. At the end of the day, though, if you look at of qualifying OZs, break them into 10% bands for really deep poverty, which is going to be to the left, band 1, the highest poverty rate opportunity zones, to the right, band 10, the lowest poverty rate opportunity zones. We see a relatively even distribution of investment into types of places based on their poverty rate. So we don't see that investors are only trying to pick the least poor of the struggling places that are eligible, but there are inroads here into the OZ marketplace and ecosystem, really for communities of every type. Now the state level map, and let's talk about this. I want to talk about this a little more, and we can come back to it in chat too, because as you'll see, so this shows us the share of all opportunity zones in each state that had received OZ investment by the end of 2020, based on tax records that the federal government has. There is a bit of an anomaly here in the state of Illinois, obviously the territory that you all represent, where about 20% or 1 in 5 of your OZs had registered investment at that time, compared to 48% nationally. And then in some other states, in Colorado, Oregon, we're looking at 3/4 or beyond had already received investment. So it's worth pausing here to ask a little bit, why, and we can go deeper into discussion later. But first, I will say, 2020 was very early. I expect that a lot of catch up has happened since this data was released, and we're trying to ask Treasury to put more information out, because I think there's real demand and interest for it. So I'd say the gap may have closed significantly, and at this point in time in 2023, Illinois may not look like the outlier that it does here. That being said, we see that population growth is one of the big correlates of states that have seen a lot of opportunity zone investment. A big factor in the Mountain West, of course, doesn't explain, why Mississippi is seeing 64% of its opportunity zones having received investment, but Illinois, and most counties in Illinois have a population stagnation or loss issue that they're grappling with. Not alone, other states like New York have this too, but that's one factor that we do see correlated with OZ interest and demand. I think the state also has, I mean, it has a very high integrity map of opportunity zones out there. I'm sure some of you at some point came across stories of poorly designated zones in New York City, in other parts of the country, of places that really didn't meet the spirit and intent of the legislation. That's not the case in Illinois. Really, without almost without exception, based on what I know, all of the zones are worthy targets. So we learned that you can't hand Andrew Cuomo a map and learn what and be satisfied with what comes out on the other end. But the state of Illinois, you could, and there was very much embodied the public spirit of what OZs was trying to accomplish. So that does mean that there were some higher need zones, I think, in Illinois' portfolio than potentially other states, but that also means that you can feel good about the places where your OZ investments are taking root, that they genuinely reflect real underlying need and what OZ's hopes to accomplish. So I think probably everyone wants to see this gap close a little, but I don't want folks to take away a negative interpretation of it. And as we'll see later, there are some real nation-leading projects taking root in Illinois that are strong demonstration cases for the rest of the country. So from there, let's see. Looking at, some of your, just some top line stats on opportunity zones, and Allison may talk about this too, but 327 opportunity zones. That's a lot more than most other states, given just how populous Illinois is, with more than 1.1 million residents kind of reflected in them, strong job counts and business counts in them, and a decent share are rural outside of metropolitan areas of all sizes. So there's not a real Chicago bias in your set of opportunity zones when you control for population and other things as well. So pausing there for a moment, I guess I will, if anyone has a question, just to break things up, I'll just pause for a moment in case someone wants to raise a hand or drop something in chat before I go on. But 3, 2, 1, I'll move on. Okay, thanks. So looking into the literature, the academic literature that's come out, and this portion of the presentation is reflective of, yes, question. Did I say that OZs were designated by the governor? Yes, OZs were, so the statute passed in DC itself said that OZs had to be designated by governors, and they could select really from among their any qualifying low-income census tracts. They could nominate up to 1/4 of them to be opportunity zones. So it was the governor's office, an office of the chief economist, maybe in coordination with DCEO to some extent, although I'm not sure, who were responsible for nominating opportunity zones. In the end, each state adopted really a different process. Some were more quantitative, some were more qualitative, some were more bottom up, kind of, asking counties to nominate their places, and then the governor was just a pass through. Others had a real vision and intent and philosophy behind them, and behind the types of places they wanted to nominate. But at the end of the day, it was governors who were tasked with doing that, and they were not given much time to do it, or any real guidance from Washington either. So, okay, one of our, I think just last month, we released a report that digs into some of the academic literature on what's happening in opportunity zones, and what we can learn about their impact at this point in time. Okay, another question. Sorry, I'll answer it in real time too. The opportunity has not closed at this point. There are multiple incentives that investors can tap into around opportunity zones, around, when, if you put their money into an opportunity fund, they can defer the tax bill on the capital gain that they're putting into an opportunity zone investment that they otherwise would have had to pay up front to the end of 2026. They can do that. If they got in the market earlier, they would then be able to also get a discount. If they got in 2019 or 2021, a discount on the taxes on that original capital gain that they're using to invest in OZs once that bill comes due in 2026. But the real motivating benefit for investors is that if they put their money in an opportunity zone investment that's qualifying, of course, and they hold it for at least 10 years, then they do not have to pay capital gains income tax on that investment when they sell it in the future. So it's that 10-year hold that's the real motivating factor. It's the one that ensures this is patient capital. It's the one that ensures that investors bear the risk here. Of course, if their benefit if their investment doesn't increase in value, then there was really no incentive that they had to enjoy around opportunity zones, right? It's only if they succeeded in investing that there's a benefit for them down the road. But that 10-year window, as long as they get their money into an opportunity zone investment by the end of 2028, hold it till the end of 2038 or beyond, they still have motivation to be investing in OZs. Okay.
Kenan,
Go ahead.
Just a quick point. The question was toward whether the number of opportunity zones has been fixed and determined.
Oh, yes. Sorry. Yeah. Good clarification. Yes, that map was fixed once at the summer of 2018. So governors had one chance to nominate their zones, and then it was certified by the Treasury, and that's kind of the map that's reigning for and prevailing for the duration of the opportunity zone investment window. We can talk later more about what comes next. We think that OZs can and should be extended or really that another round of designations should be made for another investment window. And that would, if Congress decides to go that route, that would open up the chance to nominate another round of zones as well in the future. But that's perspective on Congress getting its act together and enacting something here or there. We don't know whether that'll happen, and it wouldn't likely be until 2026 or 2028 that map question is opened up again. Thanks for clarifying that, Mike. Okay. So I'll endeavor not to make this too academic for you and just help you kind of understand what it tells us about how OZs are working, where they're working, and where we need more information. So first, I'd like to level set that OZs, if you haven't gotten a vibe yet, OZs are pretty complicated. There are a lot of moving pieces to them. And as I was intimating there in the discussion of the incentives, there are a number of timelines even that really matter for practically for the implementation of the incentive. And they overlay on a bunch of other timelines that really matter for whether we're trying to determine whether or not this thing is working. So 3 timelines to navigate and keep in mind. 1, regulatory development. It took 2 years, so until December 2019 for regulations actually to be finalized and up and running. So even though it was passed at the end of 2017, really, and there was some fundraising and investment before then, things didn't really get started until the end of 2019. Then kind of the market development timeline. So I'd say from there, people have to figure out what the heck this thing is, learn how to use it, whether they want to, go down this road. There's lots of due diligence to do, and people just have to become familiar with it as well. So I'd say, that itself takes a couple years of maturation of just understanding that what OZs are and how to fundraise around them, and then how to get that money out the door in a qualifying manner into investments on the ground. So that itself takes time. And then physical development. So we know that at this point, most OZ investments are kind of multifamily residential developments or mixed use developments. By no means all, but there's one kind of predominant asset class that would be it. So you can just look at U.S. Census Bureau data, and in the United States, the typical multifamily development takes at least 19 months, often up to 26 months to build. So that means that we're also looking at a 2-year construction window before this thing is economically active in a community. So drawing that out a little more as we think through, the flow of impact and community development, with OZs in particular, you have kind of an investment window. So the first couple of years, maybe we would want to look at the dollars invested, transaction volumes, building permits issued, maybe construction jobs associated with an investment. And then farther down the road, you have an activation stage. So now this thing that was under construction is becoming economically active in the community. New housing units, people are moving in, businesses are opening, and you have some direct effects around job growth or property value increases. And then you have kind of broader neighborhood revitalization effects that are further downstream from that, where one investment or one new building attracts follow-on investment, foot traffic attracts new establishment openings. Over time, the employment rate of local residents grows as the neighborhood improves and positive spillovers come in, and then poverty reduces too. That's the long-term work of community development revitalization, and it's very indirect and downstream from an investment incentive, which at the end of the day, that's what OZs are, right? So I think it's useful though to lay this out as we think through what we expect to see when, if we want to see if this is working out there. So from the researcher perspective, there have been about, I think, nine prominent studies on the impact of opportunity zones out there in the field, many of which have garnered some pretty big headlines, finding maybe neutral impacts of opportunity zones or no perceived impact on measures like home prices or things like that. But those ones tended to stop their sample collection right at 2020. So the first four studies there, where they end at that last dashed line. So if you look back at our timelines, it's very hard to expect a major impact to register on a market scale in some of these places when regulations weren't even finalized and most of the fundraising was later. So over time, though, we've seen that the methodology that economists and researchers have deployed has improved as understanding of OZs has increased, and we're starting to see studies with longer collection periods and variables and things that they're looking for that better match for what you would expect to find in the early days of opportunity zones, starting to show significant impacts on, the second to last study there, construction jobs and establishment openings from Arifefa et al. And the last one, which is the most important so far, from Harry Wheeler on building permits data. And we are, seeing almost what you would expect to see when you assume $100 billion is now passing through the pipeline. And some of those early studies too, they weren't just looking for early price signals, but they were looking for immediate poverty reduction effects of opportunity zones by the end of 2019 or the start of 2020. And as much as I think everyone would love to see that, there's really just no mechanism to get from an OZ capital gains tax incentive to immediate and instantaneous poverty reduction in a community in the window shown. So we're trying to play this out and help people understand again how this works and what to look for when. So yeah, I have actually a lot of sympathy for people trying to answer this question. I think it's very important. I think opportunity zones were a bit of a big, bold experiment. We have to learn from them. There will be ways to improve the policy if it gets renewed going forward. And the data environment is really bad. The best available data that I showed you from Treasury from 2020 is like the state level data is as far down as it goes. So good luck trying to figure out if any census tract in your community has received OZ investment in any way that's official or comparable to other areas. That just doesn't exist yet. So folks have had to try to work around that, but I think they've fallen into a couple pitfalls through that process. Some of which has some bad. Sometimes the data set's wrong. For example. A couple studies have pulled from a commercial real estate data set from Real Capital Analytics, almost all of which, 93% of the observations are just properties changing hands. So some investor sells a building to another investor, nothing happens to the building. That's by definition not relevant to the opportunity zones market space. Opportunity zones, you have to build new or really substantially redevelop or renovate. And in the data set where these folks were looking, that's just a vanishingly small set of even what's in there. So it's hard to detect an effect. but I won't nerd out on this too much longer. I will jump to that Wheeler study, though, that I think is really important on building permits, because it also tells us, it matches the intuition and the body of evidence that at least I'm familiar with and plugged into on what OZ investment really looks like in most communities. So looking at building permits data through June 2022 across 47 cities. So I will say that this is a metropolitan set of findings. I think the rural findings would be different, but it's the best that we have right now. Found a large immediate increase in the likelihood of commercial development in designated tracts in these cities studied, an increase of 20% increase that you would likely see any developments start or building permit be issued in a community post-release. They found positive spillovers on neighboring communities, so not a redistribution like, oh, it would have gone here, but instead it's going to jump the line and go to an opportunity zone there, and had a kind of a citywide development boost effect. Looking like it shows promising impacts on local home values without increasing rents, because it's increasing the supply of housing, not the demand of housing per se. So that's helping keep rents in check. And OZs are, and for me, this is one of the biggest points, OZs are really effective at eliciting development on vacant or underutilized land and infill development. So this isn't just in big cities like Chicago. This is going to be in smaller cities like Urbana-Champaign, Davenport, anywhere. It's kind of the semi-urban near downtown, but maybe a mile from downtown sorts of kind of parking lots, underutilized, old warehouses, things like that, that the OZ incentive appears to be very powerful in unlocking new uses for and finding new values for. So even in many mid-sized markets, think the rate of parking lots falling to actual housing and things that are generating foot traffic and revenue and all is pretty high, and that seems to be an emerging niche for opportunity zones. This is just a visual depiction of Wheeler's findings here, and you can see the real step change increase in the likelihood that a tract was going to receive investment, or excuse me, that a building permit would be issued in a tract before and after designation. And you don't see, a knock in the not eligible but non-OZ places. They don't fall, they continue on their trend, but you see a big step change increase for designated OZs. So put it all together, what can we see from kind of this body of emerging research, and especially kind of the best design studies to the moment right now? See large-scale investment with wide geographic reach, large development effects, especially in infill contexts, positive spillovers that we would hope to see, increase in housing supply, and really the OZs seem to be affecting the landscape of investment in cities. So it's glad that we're using this occasion to kind of share these insights and let folks know that even if they haven't heard much, that doesn't mean it's not happening in their communities, because it does seem, given that OZs can operate under the radar, I think they are in a lot of places, even though it might help explain some of what's going on even in folks' own backyards. But looking forward, it's a long-term policy. Its impact is going to evolve over time. I hope building permits is not its proudest legacy. We should be seeing real local community revitalization effects that ideally lead to, over time, direct impacts that benefit the lives of the people who made these low-income census tracts eligible for OZ status in the first place. There's a lot of additional studying that we need to do to understand, how this big, flexible, kind of decentralized, totally new way of going about community and economic development from the federal perspective, how it works and how we can incorporate those lessons to the future. And some other stuff that we're working on in DC, on the DC side of things, is helping to pass legislation that's going to bring transparency to the market, so we know who's how much is being invested and where. Imagine if it's hard to imagine actually if states are called on to designate another round of opportunity zones without knowing which of their zones actually benefited from the incentive and which didn't next time around, and do some other things that are kind of housekeeping to improve the legislation going forward. So I will take a look at the chat again and the time before I should stop soon, actually. Jumping into, yeah, I'll actually just go straight into these examples so we don't get too cramped on time, and then go back to questions that we have time. So on our website, and I'll drop some links in the chat as well, we have an activity map that is really just a labor of love that tries to source impactful, meaningful projects from across the country, really based on what comes through our Google News alerts on opportunity zone investments out there that show the real diversity of use cases, urban, rural, operating business to mixed use to historical preservation to clean energy that's happening out there, to give people a flavor of what OZs can do where, so hopefully they can see paths and inroads into the incentive in their work. We even have, we have a number of Illinois investments from the Chicago area here. Again, apologies for any Chicago-centricness, but it shows the variety of use cases really nicely. Starting at the top, there's the Humboldt Park Terminal Project, which is it was an old historic abandoned building that was converted into high-tech labs incubator space for companies to enjoy and rent out in that neighborhood. Ogden Commons is a super high impact project that has support from the city, a bunch of other CDFIs, philanthropies, local foundations to provide affordable housing and revitalize a good chunk of the neighborhood that's in. Rise Kit, closer to downtown, is a social impact startup that's piloting new workforce development models to get the underemployed into jobs. Hope Manor Village we'll come back to on the next page. And then you have like a community revitalization center with big philanthropic involvement in St. Edmunds. You have a warehouse and distribution center for the Method soap and cleaning chemical company in the Pullman neighborhood, and just a really wide variety of super deep impact projects in really worthy neighborhoods there. And I have to again give a shout out to the Chicagoland OZ Consortium that helped me complete this list for y'all here today. We have on our website as well a bunch of deal profiles that kind of show how practically OZ money is becoming part of transactions that meaningful high impact affordable housing transactions in different ways across the country, including one, the Hope Manor Village one in Chicago, where we have a big institutional investor, a Fifth Third Bank, investing alongside the city of Chicago, the National Equity Foundation, which is a local CDFI and low-income housing tax credit provider, coming together and creating this nice residential project, affordable project for veterans and their families in the city there. So it's a great kind of demonstration case too of there aren't that many of projects that have successfully combined OZ financing with LIHTC, and the fact that they were able to do that and got the buy-in of some of the institutional investors like Fifth Third there, some of the highlights of that story. A number of rural demonstration cases are taking root in the neighborhood too. In Brookville, Indiana, the local initiative support coalition, LISC, out of Indianapolis, has a great profile of a project where there was a local family that owned a local business in Brookville, which is a town of, I think, about 5,000 people. They sold it, they had a capital gain, they heard about opportunity zones, and they invested money in revitalizing an entire block of downtown, bringing housing downtown, mixed-use development. Even I think they directly invested in a pharmacy and some of the other businesses down there too. And it's just a nice little anecdote of kind of how even families and folks with local attachment to communities can invest and take advantage of the OZ tax incentives for the benefit of their hometowns. We have rural demonstration cases. Promised Land OZs is an opportunity fund that's based in Aurora, focused on farmland. And even so it's just over the border, in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, where it's called the Center on Rural Innovation, Corey, has an opportunity fund that invests in rural opportunity zone high-tech startups, including this one in the AI space. Just across the river from some of you there. So you can see, I think, especially in the real estate side of things, Valley House flats not included. There's a lot of the preponderance of activity is going to be metropolitan in nature, but in things like there are many other areas though where rural areas absolutely have a competitive advantage and are not excluded from the OZ investor and investment marketplace. I will stop there, and I have to apologize for going so long. So here, whoops, that's gone. I'll share my screen again to bring slides back up in case there are questions, but I'll let the MCs determine whether we want to pause on questions now or come back to those later.
Thank you so much, Kenan. I think for time's sake, if there's no pressing questions at this time, I do see a little bit of questions there, that we will go ahead and let Allison present her portion and then move on to Q&A after that.
Sounds good. Thank you, Nancy, again. And good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad I could join you for a little bit and just tell you kind of where DCEO is sitting right now in terms of opportunity zones and how we've tried to leverage some investment and spur some growth and development in these zones. As Kenan mentioned, it's a little difficult. This isn't necessarily a program that's run by the state. It's handled a little differently, but we really have tried to step in and spur some of that investment to get things moving in some of these zones around the state. So the first thing I'm going to show you guys here really quick is, and I will put this in the chat because I did see that question come up. This is the state of Illinois' opportunity zone map. This is on our website. We have it there. It's an interactive map, so you can search for wherever address you are. As Kenan mentioned, there's over 300 zones here in the state of Illinois. These were determined before I came on with the department here, so I can't really tell you exactly everything that went into selecting these zones, but these are the ones that we have for right now. Illinois also does another designation for a lot of our programs that's called an underserved area. And of course, this map is also on our website. I'm going to switch to that one over here really quick. So assuming my computer will not die on me. It's going to pull it up. And when you see this map here, you'll see that it does overlay, but is a little bit more expansive than what you see for the opportunity zones. The good thing here is many of our incentive programs then for the state augment all of our benefits for these underserved areas that, again, go alongside with the opportunity zones. So as these investments come in, we do have state assistance programs that will go along with them. This is everything from our new Reimagining Energy and Vehicles programs to our manufacturing, our micro program, which is focusing on microprocessors, to our standard Edge Tax credit, which is the economic development for a growing economy. So these are out there but we've taken a step even beyond that with trying to spur that investment coming in. When the opportunity zones first became, a viable program as we're looking there, it was about the same time that Governor Pritzker was able to started implementing our Rebuild Illinois capital program across there. So we took some funds a couple years ago. I believe it was in 2021 that we really started on this and put out a capital grant funding opportunity that for projects that specifically had to be located in these enterprise zones or opportunity zones. As we're looking at that, we funded 10 projects from around the state. I mean, we have, of course, one in Cook County, but then we went west to Winnebago County and then proceeded to come all the way down the state to deep southern Illinois in Perry and Gallatin County. And part of our thought behind this $14.7 million of an investment that we did on projects that did everything electrical extensions to water main replacements to streetscapes and road work was if we can start putting in some investment into these areas using the state's capital dollars, hopefully that will result in more private investment than through the opportunity zones. Right now, understanding exactly what that impact is, we're still working through that because, as Kenan mentioned, the data is not the best in how we're getting at that. But that's something we're working on and looking at that. The other thing we've tried to do with additional capital grant programs that we've had is and I'm going to look at our Rebuild Downtown and Main Streets program that we had last year, is we always, as part of our evaluation, do give augmented points when these projects are coming in. Again, looking at those underserved areas, our disproportionately impacted areas, which were areas that were designated due to the pandemic, and our opportunity zones that are in there. So if the local municipalities or counties or private entities, again, are making that investment in those underserved areas, we're helping to try and augment those projects or give a little boost to those projects. So that's where that investment is going. With that, in the Rebuild Downtown and Main Streets, I tried messing with the data a little bit to see exactly how much was in opportunity zones. It's taking a little bit more work for us to figure that out, but we did have a significant amount of that going into our overall, as we look at, again, underserved area, disproportionately impacted areas, that they all deal with a little bit different metrics of trying to get at what is that economically depressed area of the state. So that's a really quick highlight of some of the things that the state is doing and where we're looking to keep trying to boost interest into these opportunity zones coming through there. Nancy, I'll turn that back over. I think I left us 10 minutes for questions here.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Allison, for being with us here today and representing DCO. And again, thank you, Kenan, as well, for your wonderful and thorough overview that I think is really great just to kind of center this conversation with our audience today and here in Illinois today. And we have a few questions that have come through. Want to really encourage folks to put their questions in the chat at this time. And of course, I'll have a question if there's time for that as well, but let me not cut in line and get some other folks' questions out here. We do have a question asking about the looking at recent literature from economists Wheeler and Kennedy, suggesting the need for significant reform in the opportunity zone laws, such as instituting reporting requirements, requiring assets used for tax breaks to be used exclusively within a zone and show real benefits to poor and working class areas. So the question is, are there any reforms being implemented or discussed at this time? And I know, Kenan, you had kind of mentioned what are the types of recommendations that are going to be being made, as well as what you suspect might be considered. So this is now that moment to really kind of talk about what that might look like, what reform might look like.
Yeah. Thanks, Nancy, and thanks for the question, Terry. So there is broad, I think almost near unanimous consensus bipartisan, really across all portions of the OZ marketplace and ecosystem, that there needs to be better data and transparency and reporting requirements. So that there's a bipartisan piece of legislation and bicameral again in Congress that's really just waiting for Congress to start passing legislation again that would fix some of those major consensus issues and problems. So here, what does transparency look like? I think that looks like different things to different people. At the end of the day, we're still talking about taxpayer information here. So the consensus around transparency isn't that anyone who is an OZ investor should therefore have all of their taxes opened up for public scrutiny. It's really what do we need to know in order to know whether this policy is working, and that's more summary stats at the very local scale down to the census tract level, but for number of projects, address of projects, number of investors behind them, amount of investment, and just think of, what do you need to know as a local person, what's happening in your community, versus what would you like to know, and it's really around it's around what you need to know, and that's where that's the only thing that we think could actually get through Congress as well. The consensus piece there of just the basic facts about what OZ investment looks like in terms of number, quantity, types of folks, and types of assets and investments in the ground in the communities themselves. So that's one. We are working to get that passed. That's part of what we do here as well, and a number of others are too. It's really just it's kind of held hostage to congressional gridlock right now. I think everyone would want it, and it would serve the market better too. There are other within that, there would be endeavors to sunset some of the bad zones. That is a problem that some other states have, and at the end of the day, it's about 120 odd out of 8,000 some opportunity zones that really don't pass the smell test that should be sunset. So it would do that and then allow any governor that did have to sunset a zone to redesignate one somewhere else for the remainder of the window. I think that's it's good for the integrity of the program here too. And then beyond that, I think it's lots of open questions for what OZs 2.0 looks like, if there is an OZs 2.0, if Congress picks up, decides they want to do this again. So if you, I know there are a lot of folks who want to preserve the flexibility of opportunity zones and see that that's what gets you the ability to do farmland and startups and deeply affordable housing and market rate housing if that's what your community needs, and allows families or a company to acquire historic building to move their headquarters into in mid-sized cities downtown and refurbish that and bring foot traffic downtown and all too. There's those things that are kind of use cases that I think a lot of people view as good for the community, but if you start to complicate the model and the more things you attach to it, the less investment you're going to get. So striking that balance, it'll depend on who's in power in Washington too. I think if Democrats are shaping OZs 2.0, it will have more of those kind of requirements and restrictions on use cases beyond just making sure it's additive and within the bounds of what's there now. If it's Republicans or more down the middle bipartisan reform process for 2.0, I think it'll likely look a lot like it does now, just with some fine tunings and things there. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thanks so much. We have another question here that I wanted to ask. Would any tax accountant be able to advise clients on the tax benefits of these projects? If not, does the DCEO have suggestions for professional advisors that potential investors can talk to about making these investments?
Not knowing the full width and breadth of what tax accountants know and don't know, I wouldn't say necessarily that is a broad thing that accountants are aware of across the board. I will say, as Kenan mentioned, the Chicagoland Opportunity Zone Consortium is a great group that does a lot with trying to answer some of these questions and going at that. So that's always a good first place to start with that. And I know I saw another question in there on, is there a state of Illinois contact or subject matter expert that to talk to us about this program? We've had some recent turnover here at DCEO, and our new folks are getting up to speed on where we are as a state with this, but I'm happy to share some contact information of those that can try and help and guide from the perspective of where the state fits into the picture here, and can help talk through some ideas with you potentially on that. So I will share that with Nancy so she can include that in the information she's sending out following this.
Thank you. And so I wanted to ask a question, kind of a two-tiered question. One is sort of specific to what we do at Extension, but then for economic development professionals across the state, what you think really the outreach implications are and sort of the technical assistance implications are for us in our service areas. And I'll leave it at that, but I did have another question about the that Opportunity Zones Extension Act of 2021 and what was sort of the deciding factors with that introduced legislation. If you have that information and sort of what's the timeline and what are sort of the leverage points that kind of affect that as well. And so I know that's loaded, and I can ask that again if you want me to.
Sure, I'll answer part of it. You can tell me if I miss some of it. So I think because so many elements of the TCJA, the 2017 tax cuts, are going to come up for expiration in 2025 and 2026, we do think that next, right after the presidential election, there will be, there has to be tax policy done again in Congress, and that it would likely attach to a broader bill that addresses some of the even bigger elements of CCJA as they come up for reconsideration. So I don't, now that I think it's going to be, I would be surprised if Congress does a lot in an election year coming up here that would allow it to be passed. Unfortunately, it would be great if it does happen, and I know we and others are always on the lookout for it. The fact that some of the lead OZ sponsors are no longer in the running for either of the party's nominations, I think increases the likelihood that something does happen sooner, because this is all time sensitive. Still not optimistic that much will happen anytime soon. I will say, so that piece of legislation is really one that we worked hard on, a piece of bipartisan legislation that you could get, that could pass and could get bipartisan support behind. So I think it very much reflected the priorities of everyone closely watching this, and where there's appetite and a healthy dose of realism around it too, and really what's needed for the policy at this stage. So doing some of the housekeeping and closing, like the data reporting and transparency was always supposed to be part of OZ's 1.0, or when it initially passed, it just had to get stripped out because of quirks of how they passed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. But it was always envisioned that we would have a lot more data on what's happening in OZs, because it is such a noteworthy and important experiment to learn from. So it's some of that housekeeping that we hope is able to pass before the sunsets.
Kenan, a question, and kind of goes to the general question up earlier about sources of information and support in looking at OZ investments. Can you spend a minute or two just talking about the qualified opportunity fund, the qualified opportunity funds and what role they might play?
Yes, good question. So all OZ investments has to flow through a qualified opportunity fund. These vary in size tremendously. Some are, because OZs are so flexible, some are closely held. It's kind of one individual investor wants to make an OZ investment, it has to go through an opportunity fund. So it just sets one up and then does the thing. Others are much broader and bigger and are soliciting investment from a much broader pool of individuals. And I think that those are the funds that are probably of most interest to folks in this group, just because they're investing on a broader, they're looking for a wider range of investment opportunities and potentially a wider range of locations. That being said, a lot of really meaningful investments are some of the closely held ones, like the one in Brookville, Indiana. So they're, I think, being plugged into the folks in the community, either the businesses or the business owners, or the banks and financial institutions, and anyone who is likely sitting on soon to have a capital gain may be up for OZ investing, because that's the pool that they're selecting from here. So having a good sense of who those people are, I think, can narrow the field. And if you're from a relatively small community where that group of folks isn't that large, but maybe there's a real downtown or historic preservation or redevelopment goal that the community has that you're looking for local investment and buy-in behind, I think that's the sort of people you can bring to the table around the OZ idea and try to get them to utilize the funds to help if it's of interest. Otherwise, yeah, a lot of the does that answer did that answer the question?
Yeah, thanks. I was thinking that Existing Opportunity Fund might source for information about excuse me, investment details, how to make it, what needs to be considered, or might find good advisors, etc.
Oh, yes. Yeah, they are. I mean, there's I think Novogradac, I mentioned before, they have a directory of a bunch of the largest opportunity funds. I'm sure there are some based in Chicago in the Midwest that have an investment footprint and portfolio that they're trying to build there. So I think that is a good place to start and look. And also the big institutional investors and banks and anyone who has a CRA obligation. If they also has a capital gain, they may end up being interested in doing OZ work and impact-minded OZ work too, if they are thinking of it through the CRA lens.
Excellent, thank you. And we had a question about how we can better market to OZ investors, and wanted to throw that question to both Allison and Kenan, but also perhaps address it a little bit as well. We did have a more of like a resource-based webinar a while back on different resources available for working with opportunity zones. And if you're looking for OZ investors, what are some of those sort of action items for you as an economic development professional? I'm very happy to include some of those pointers in the follow-up email as well, and want to also give our current presenters on the call an opportunity to address that too.
I think from my perspective, one of the ways to better market your opportunity zone is because again, this is an entire census tract that's out there that's designated. So what is the area that you are looking to have some development in? What is it that you want to have that development be as part of it? It's hard to just say, hey, we've got this zone, come develop, if you don't have an idea of how you would like to see that developed and go from there. That is honestly one of the first big things to understand is what do you want to do with that area from a local community perspective, and how do you want to see that impact? If you're putting something out more forward facing to say, hey, look, this is what we would like to have here. Are you interested?
That was a good answer. Nothing to add. I think that's
Okay, and of course, we're 5 minutes past the hour. I know about half of our group has signed off already. Just want to thank everyone for signing on and participating today. Thank our presenters as well. This is an important topic and a great reminder for our state and our professionals across the state. We hope to get our numbers up a little bit in the remaining time, and we'll have to provide a bit of an update here later on as well. And so on behalf of U of I Extension and Rural Partners as well, thank you so much for your time and expertise. And if you don't have any other takeaways, am I seeing a nod? Anyone want to add any other takeaways? No. So thank you again and have a wonderful rest of your week.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.